Welcome, everyone. We're a minute past time. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for taking some time out of your day today to join us and hear more about data and analytics, specifically how you do it, some of the best practices and some of the lessons learned that we saw in the data and that our panelists are going to share with you today. A few quick logistics. So we have the chat function and we have the Q&A function. If you need any clarification as our hosts are going through the presentation, please, our panelists are going through the presentation, please go ahead and just share your questions. And we're also going to have some questions for all of you. So let us know any challenges that you're having or tips that you need, because our panelists and other attendees can definitely help you out with that today. Thanks again for joining. I'm going to hand it over to Patrick, my colleague, who's going to kick things off for us.
Thanks, Shelley. And hello, everyone. Welcome. So glad to have you today on this webinar. Our topic today is on operationalizing data and analytics. This is the third in our series of webinars. And this one really, if you've had the chance to check out the first one or the second one, this one is really focused on how do you execute and implement a data and analytics program in your association today? You know, maybe you're at a sort of foundational point and still trying to figure out what this means for you. Maybe you're pretty advanced and are looking to get better. We want to facilitate a conversation today around what that actually might look like and give you some context into, you know, maybe some of the problems that you've had or barriers to your success, getting a little bit better at those. I wanted to share this quote with you. This is from Forrester Research. And it kind of gets to the heart of the growth of data analytics worldwide. So it reads, a new kind of company, we call them insights-driven businesses, has formed. They're growing at an average of more than 30% annually and are on track to earn 1.8 trillion by 2021. These customer-obsessed firms systematically harness insights across their organization and implement them to create competitive advantage. You know, right out of the gate, this is a really telling quote to me. I know data and analytics, and you could get even a little bit more nuanced and sophisticated there and say artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of those areas that are sort of applications of data. This is just really exploding worldwide. Economists call it the fourth industrial revolution. It's anticipated that it's just going to really dominate the way that business is being done, not just in the future, but in ways that you see taking hold today. It may have started in the financial sector, the healthcare sector, but if you look at how you purchase things now, Amazon, other businesses seem to know what you want before you even do. In manufacturing and energy, all of these places, whatever type of data it is, it's really being harnessed to drive decision-making in a strategic way, but also a very tactical way. My goal for us today is to consider what this might look like for the association sector. It's difficult to imagine a future for associations that doesn't include a more purposeful, meaningful role for data. And whether we get there through experimentation that takes a month, a year, 5 years, whatever it might look like, this is something that we all really need to be taking seriously in the context of how we continue on, because we all know that the for-profit sector, competition is coming from various places for all of us, and so we need to kind of keep pace with all of that. The data that I'm going to present to you today, and that my co-speakers Bill and Reggie are going to round out in some discussion, comes from a study that Association Analytics and McKinley Advisors ran in the early springtime. If you haven't had a chance to check out the report, there's a link to it. You can absolutely access that, read through it. It should give you some context into how your association is doing in terms of data and analytics, how you know the maturity of your program versus maybe what your peer cohort looks like, and also some tips and strategies for how you might want to think about tackling some of those barriers that could be blocking you today for being more successful. And of course, I'm one of your speakers today. I'm the Vice President of Research and Analytics at McKinley Advisors. I've had the fortune of working for McKinley for about 10 years, and I've worked for associations for 20 or more. My role has always been in research. So I've had the chance to see data and analytics and research evolve over time. And it's never been more rapid than the last 2, 3, 4 years. It's really astounding to see some of the things that are happening. So I'm really looking forward to the chance to engage you all today in that conversation. Reggie, would you mind giving an intro, and then Bill will have you.
Yep, I'm Reggie Henry, the Chief Information and Engagement Officer at ASAE. And I was getting ready to put it into the chat, but I'll say it to you all right now. Great to see everybody here. Great study that was done, and please ask questions along the way. A lot of us on this call have been through kind of the data analytics wars, if you will, and so we can share some insights with you along the way.
All right, so I'm Bill Conforti, Senior VP of Strategy and Solutions with Association Analytics. I've been in software products and services for over 20 years, last 6 with the A2, and we've done a lot during those 6 years, custom BI solutions, more recently, last 3 or so with our product Acumen. So we've learned a lot about data strategy, about analytics broadly, seen a lot of mistakes, a lot of things go well, and look forward to sharing some of that with you today.
Thank you, Bill. And just judging by our pictures, I think Bill and myself may have been a little dishonest in terms of the use that those are taken, but we'll try to get those updated for the next one. Okay, so report highlights. Before we get to the actual data that we collected, I do want to ask a quick poll question to all of you that are participating today, and we're going to throw that up on the screen. This is really to help us understand your own evolution in the data and analytics program you have. So if you would fill this out, how would you describe the maturity of your data and analytics program today? And you can see the 4 responses there. So please take a minute and submit, and then we'll have the chance to talk about that.
And Patrick, you never realize, it never really gets thrown in your face so much how out of date your headshot is until you're on this kind of Zoom calls all the time.
Public shaming is a way to to encourage a better headshot. So
it's starting to look like it's my high school graduation picture or something. It really wasn't that long ago, actually.
Okay. So we have results back. What I'm seeing is that about half of our attendees today are developing a data analytics program right now. Just a little bit less than a third do not have a program in place. And then 20%, 21% have a formal data analytics program, but it's evolving. No one really feels like they've optimized their data and analytics function, which is expected and something that we'll be talking to you today about some of the steps that are involved in that. Okay.
Patrick,
Yes.
There was a comment from Peggy, one of our attendees.
Mm-hmm.
She says, truth be told, we collect data, but we don't know if it's the right data for accurately assessing or projecting the future. We don't know until the future gets here. I think that's such a timely comment, and maybe we can try to address that as we, Reggie's laughing.
It really is.
Go through the presentation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peggy.
Yeah, Peggy, thank you. Echoing Shelley's thoughts there. That's just so, I think that's the story for a lot of, if not all, associations that are really trying to figure out what data and analytics means for them. And one of the themes that you'll hear as we move through the presentation is that so much of this comes down to planning and strategy and really understanding what's important for you and looking out ahead. And I would ask Bill and Reggie if they want to contribute anything now to that idea. We'll also, of course, in a little bit, be talking about some of those challenges more directly. So Bill, Reggie, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think, and I'll talk about this a little bit more a little bit later on, but it's important that you establish what you're trying to do with your data analytics strategy, because you can do everything and Gartner has a maturity model, if you will, that talks about this, that moves from hindsight to insight to foresight. And I think the least developed one that I've seen, not only in associations, but everywhere, is the idea of foresight. And so it moves you up this curve of looking at what happened, why did it happen, what will happen, and can I make things happen? And I think that future focus one that Peggy's talking about is does your platform and your knowledge and your sophistication allow you to be more predictive about things? And I think we're all on that learning curve right now, quite honestly.
Yeah, so I would just add a couple of quick things to that. I guess one is, with the way predictive models work, I mean, some will work better than others, but you can predict, based on the data that you do have, right? And some of the data that you do collect, looking at it historically over the last, X number of years, are going to predict things like, retention or attendance or purchasing or things like that. And you can work, with some help, possibly, you can work all that out mathematically. And the other thing I would say is, don't worry as much if it's exactly the right data. I mean, like a lot of other things, one of the most important things is to actually get started and look at it as a process of continuous improvement. So you can improve the quality of your data and also the specific data that you are using over time.
Great, thank you, Bill. There was another comment that came in, and I actually from Bruce, and it has. I'm sorry, give me one second here. I'm pulling up the comments. This one is from Bruce Rosenthal, and it has to do with that some associations, many associations even collect data, report it out, but then it might not be actually used in decision-making, or it might, I'm extrapolating here, but it might be disregarded and not trusted, or whatever the issue might be. And I think that's a really good astute point as well. So I would actually like to address that in our first slide right here, because I think, again, it really comes down to the complexity of data and analytics on a number of fronts. Now, the quote I have on the screen is that the transformation to a data-driven culture is not a technology initiative, it's a change management initiative. And if you were to think about data and analytics and how to build it into an organization, your initial reaction might be, well, I need a software. I need to go and find technology, a group like Association Analytics, to sort of corral where all of our data lives, make it accessible, make it really easy to understand how to use it. Or you might go to the place of thinking, this is going to require a lot of technical skill sets to crunch the numbers and really make sense of them. And those things are true. They could involve software solutions. They could involve staff with specific skill sets. But the area that associations, in my experience, tend to get most tripped up in, and this is where you can add to your comments, and we'll spend some time talking about later. The area that I see is in execution. It's in planning. When you develop a data and analytics program, you have to think about what data do you actually need, and do you have it today? Where does it live? Is it dispersed throughout the organization? If you're going to use it, for what purpose? And how do you get buy-in at every level? How do you get buy-in from the senior staff, the volunteer leadership, to be more data-driven and to make decisions on that? How do you get staff to cooperate with one another to share that, and for them to feel comfortable using it as well? So there's just so much planning that is involved in thinking through what's going to be relevant for your association. Not all of those might be. But to actually go through the mechanics of, this is a pretty big deal. We're gonna move from a place of maybe making decisions based on your subjective judgment to relying on a more objective method of doing that. And so it's going to involve some steps that are beyond just the software or technology component of things.
Yeah, but what I'll add to that, Patrick, is, and I'm glad you have this slide here, because it's not a technology initiative at all. It's really about, how does your organization make decisions? both for the current and for the future. So it's a strategy decision. And so one of the things that I think everybody should pay attention to is what you build your case around for doing this work, because once you start this work, it doesn't end. And so, I tell some of my colleagues all the time, don't think you're doing a business analytics project, because you're not doing a business analytics project. What you're doing is incorporating a new way of making decisions in your organization and build your case around that.
Yep. Thank you, Reggie. To those points, we, in this study, which was of association executives, we asked what their top challenges were in advancing the collection, use, and application of data in the association. If you saw the first presentation in this series, this slide might be familiar to you, but it's just so relevant to so many of the drivers of what you probably are experiencing today in your own association, if you are trying to become more data-driven and if you are trying to build an analytics program. So the top three challenges that association executive expressed in this study was, first, the lack of an organizational data strategy. And over half associations felt this way. And I actually think it underlies the other two as well, that they're interconnected. So when you think about an organizational data strategy, you could, data is fundamentally an organizational opportunity, and it's fundamentally an organizational problem. It lives across the organization, although it might be collected by various departments. And that involves a lot of coordination and thoughtfulness in terms of, we could potentially measure any million or more data points, and we could use it to support every department in every way. But that's overwhelming to think about. So an organizational data strategy means figuring out what are the most important things that we really need to do. How is this data going to support the organization from the organizational perspective? And then what are its priorities for its departments? And furthermore, how are we going to facilitate that process, from the human components of it and the training and the support that they need, to coordinating all of these data points and how you're going to actually use them. And those other 2 points on this slide, the staff skills or expertise and streamlining data to measure across departments, those entirely relate to your organizational data strategy. Yes, you might need someone in technology that's going to be able to help you understand where the data lives and which sources you should be drawing on, and limitations and all the difficulties related to that. But if you don't have that organizational strategy to say, this is going to be your job, it lives in your wheelhouse, and we have these other departments and they need to get their data in, and that kind of thing, your concerns about the staff skills or expertise are going to be that much more difficult to overcome. You kind of need to know what staff skills you will require to get the job done in order to really suss out those staffing and skills needs. The streamlining data to measure across departments, it's most common, of course, for associations to have functional departments where they each have a set of data points that live with them. You might have publications with publications data, membership with membership data, and so forth. And if you're a staffer, the typical challenge might be, I really need data points X, Y, and Z to do my job. And they live in 3 different departments. So is it going to be all right for me to ask these staffers to pull this data for me? And furthermore, I see that actually there's 2 sources of data for the same data point, which is the most legitimate one for me to draw on. I mean, these are the types of questions that you have when you have such a fragmented organization with data living in different places. And that's not a bad thing, but it does need some coordination. And so again, the organizational strategy can really speak to, here's where all of this data lives, here's how it's going to come together, and here's how people can request that data, how they should be reporting it, and so forth and so on. This slide is based on a question: how accurately do the following statements describe your organization's data culture today? And when I look at this, I sort of have a mixed reaction, if I'm going to be honest. And this is my interpretation of what all of this is telling us, if it's telling a story. Now, respondents, association executives, were asked to say how accurate each one of these statements is regarding their own association, whether they feel like data is being used to measure organizational impact, whether it's used to anticipate and plan for the future, serve customers more effectively, and so forth and so on. And you'll see if you look at these bars next to each statement that there's, to borrow a term from data, there's a lot of dispersion there. There's a good number of people that feel like these statements accurately describe their association, extremely accurately. Those are the red bars. There's those in the dark blue that feel like, yeah, you're doing pretty well. And light blue, also, this is a moderate reflection of our association. And then there's maybe a smaller share in the purple and the gray that feel like, no, this isn't us. We're really not doing that well when it comes to using data in all of these ways. And the story that this tells to me is that, if you combine those red, dark blue, and light blue bars, you get around 3/4 or more of associations that feel like you're at least making some headway into all of these points. You have, maybe around 85%, somewhere around there, of association executives that feel like data really is being used as a critical tool for measuring our organizational impact. So most associations, but it's only a smaller subset of those that feel like you're really knocking it out of the park. And this gets to the maturity of associations in their data program, and we're sort of all on a journey in that sense. There's also a question of, what's the right level of effort for an association in supporting the data analytics program. And this slide tells us how many staff out of all of those associations that actually do have a data an analytics program today and employ at least one data and analytics professional, whether they're a researcher or whatever it might be. What does that staff structure look like? And this tells us for full-time, part-time, and outsourced staff, what that looks like for that association. So if you look over on the left-hand side of this slide, about 1/3 of associations that have data staff have only one staffer. A little over 1/3, so 37%, have between 2 and 4, and just under 1/3 have over 5 staff.
So Patrick,
and these numbers,
do I get to count the association analytics people as part of my staff?
I think if you're counting them in the outsourced bucket, absolutely.
And I'm asking that kind of in jest, but I really mean it. I think that too often associations get into this "I have to do it myself" mentality, and they suffer in terms of speed of adoption. They suffer in terms of strategy about how to make this real in their organization and all those other things. I can certainly say that we wouldn't have been anywhere near where we are in terms of our maturity about this stuff if we would have just done it ourselves. So look at this chart, folks, and really look at and think about what you should be outsourcing to get this work done. It's new work for most associations, and there's resources there to help you.
And Reggie, I'm so glad.
And panelists, can I jump in with a question that Ben has posted, and I think it's really relevant to this slide. He asks, do you think it's better to have a full-time employee dedicated to data analytics or spread it across multiple people, departments for different viewpoints? We're trying to balance getting good new ideas from others while not having too many cooks in the kitchen.
I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. If you're asking me whether or not there needs to be a point person who manages the eventual data analytics function in your organization, absolutely. If you got 10 people trying to do this, you don't make much headway. But that person has to have a team of people throughout the organization to constantly be asking questions about what's the organizational view we're trying to project here? What are the questions we're trying to answer here? What are the strategies we're trying to test here? And so I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but you absolutely, if you can at all afford it, have a person responsible for data analytics. And again, if you can all afford it, don't put a lot of other stuff on their plate. Don't give this to the membership director because you just happen to be looking at membership data this time. Have a person do this job.
You know, Reggie, and I'll also ask Bill to maybe weigh in some of the things that you've seen, but it also raises the question of prioritization for me. You know, this goes back to the organizational planning and strategy, but every department is going to have just a laundry list of priorities and things that would make them work better. And having an individual staffer or staffers work across departments to understand what those are is going to be part of the key, but so will prioritizing what can actually be accomplished. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the best way to do that. I know I have seen models where there's, you know, a data governance team that's cross-functional and they get together and figure out the priorities and kind of resolve queries in that way. But any thoughts on how associations can prioritize when resources are really limited?
Yeah, so two things. I think data governance, in my mind, is a little bit different than the data analytics stuff, because the data governance is dealing with all the minutia of fields and data updates and all of this, and I think that's a different skill set than the data analytics. So I'll say that up front. You know, I think what I hope we all learn, are learning as we go through this, data is probably the most important asset that an organization has. And enriching that data and using that data from a strategic place is, I think, the key to most organizations' future. And so convincing your organization that that's what this project is about. This project isn't about a better reporting. We can do better reporting in an Excel spreadsheet. This is about equipping your organization to make better decisions in the future. And I think if you start there and have a different conversation there, you end up making more progress.
Yeah, I would just add to that when it comes to governance and when it comes to kind of data subject matter expertise, right? Those are the things where you kind of need representation across all your key stakeholders and all departments. But when it comes to the analytics function itself, I definitely think if you can centralize that and have an individual or maybe a small team of individuals working horizontally across those business areas, I think the results will be much better. As a matter of fact, I would say if there's any one single thing that's like the biggest predictor of success in an analytics program, I think that's really it. Is have you dedicated you know enough resources, and have you giving someone responsibility and accountability for that function.
Thank you. So I heard a little bit about some of the challenges. I hope that they allowed you to kind of reflect on your own association. Since we've chatted about those, I'd like to ask Bill to take us through some of the solutions that you've seen with association analytics. As you've seen associations really begin to execute and become very successful at the analytics program. You know, what are the tips and tricks? What are the most important things that associations really need to be aware of?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So just looking at the slide there, looking at the question, you know, how do you turn things around? So I guess the short answer would be, you know, one step at a time, right? And the first step can be a small one. It doesn't necessarily require, you know, a big, you know, consulting company to help you, although that will probably get you there faster. It doesn't even really require a formal data strategy per se, although strategy is a lot of what we're talking about today. So there's a quote in the report from Julie Shulo, she's our CEO, and essentially says that there's a lot of things you can do without that formal strategy. It really just requires, in the very first steps, you know, a few curious individuals that are interested in learning new things. But when you do want something more formal, you want to kind of apply all the insights that are in this report to your organizations, right? Get help if you need it. You know, in our space, there are a lot of good options. You know, for this, there are many vendors that are good consultants. They have deep industry expertise, and they know a lot about the tools and technologies that are used here. But you know, when we do an engagement like this, we kind of break it up into a few key areas. You know, we look at organization and culture, right? So we've seen that a lot throughout the report. You know, do you have executive support? Do you have the right skills and training really look at how decisions are currently being made in your organization, right? So that's kind of getting to Reggie's point, which is that this is really about changing how decisions are being made more than it is about any one particular, technical or even process-oriented change. Look at strategic alignment. So do you have clear goals and success factors? Do the KPIs that you have support your strategic plan, right? So there's another example in the report where it compares KPIs that focus on outputs. And a good example is like a conversion metric versus a KPI that focuses on an outcome, which is something that you hope to achieve, right? That's what your senior leaders really care about. An example there is the percentage of members who agree that the association has a strong value proposition. So then there's technology and infrastructure. This one is probably the least important. We've kind of covered this, but it's not really a tech project. It's really about people and change management. And finally, look at your data, of course, right? So how is it being collected? How is it reported? What's the level of data quality? And do you have rules and guidance around the ownership and accountability, right? So that's the governance things that we were talking about. And so all of this, the goal is to develop a roadmap. And get to the next, right? So what are the key considerations for creating a roadmap? So first, we really do need leadership support. Without it, we're not going to get anywhere. But I would say that that's very rarely the main obstacle to progress on some of these things. So we see in our studies, and the study here showed that over 80% of the associations kind of consistently showed that organizational commitment to data. We want to empower the staff at all levels, right? So the empowered staff are going to drive adoption for your programs. And if you allow them to do things like create KPIs for their own initiatives, it shows that you value their expertise. It kind of increases transparency and this culture of accountability that's going to be needed to really drive these things forward. And lastly, start with a pilot, right? So again, there's a lot of cliches, eat an elephant one bite at a time, or different things like that, that get to the idea of starting small and building from there. But it's not only starting small, but starting small in a smart way, right? So you have to choose a set of really high impact business objectives or business problems or questions that can be addressed through analytics. And that's going to get you the quick wins that can build credibility and build momentum for your programs. Okay, and lastly, what are the goals for this roadmap? So the first goal is shifting the mindset, right? And so how can we shift our mindset to help us make data-informed decisions, right? So measurement is a key part of this. We talked a lot about metrics and things that you measure, but you want to not just be focusing again on those outputs, but you want to connect the measurements that you are making to the outcomes that you want. Second, align value in business. So develop those goals and KPIs to measure impact, but it's not only for members and customers, but it's really impact throughout the organization. And understand that this is going to be something that takes a while, right? It's a long process. It's a continuous improvement process, and really don't be afraid to experiment, and don't be constrained by the fact that your data might not be perfect, or you're not sure that you have the right data starting off. And lastly is establish clear business problems to solve, right? This is the point Reggie's made several times already, which is, this really could actually come first, right? If you don't know what problem you're trying to solve, and if the things that you're doing with your analytics now are not really tied to something specific, a business problem that you're trying to solve or a question you're trying to answer, then that's, maybe something that you probably shouldn't be doing, honestly. Okay, so Reggie is here with us. Reggie's figured all this out and more long ago. So Reggie, what can you tell us about how to put all this stuff into action?
Yeah, so Reggie has started down this journey. That's where Reggie is in this process right now. But some lessons learned, I think, and I'll break it down into 3 or 4 areas. One is how did we start this project, and what were the key decision-making points there? What it feels like to go through this project, and 2 and 3, what's next for us. And I think you started off really well in talking about what are the goals of the project. And I would just ask people, take time with this piece right here, because you can either make the case for doing a project, or you can make the case for establishing a business analytics practice, and they're 2 different things. So at the beginning, we kind of had three goals. One was, and I think I mentioned it earlier, solidifying our business decision-making process. That was a goal of this. And at the core of that is, what is the data we need to make better decisions? So solidifying those decision-making process. The second one, which I'll tell you was just ambitious as hell, but I wanted us to be able to do this, was anticipating member need. What does our data tell us about member need so that we can begin to develop strategies about how to take care of those needs? So anticipating member need. The third one was to democratize this data across all staff. And I think Patrick was talking about it earlier. You know, certain staff had certain data in certain applications and they use it for certain business processes. Well, let's get all that data in a place where everybody can take advantage of any data coming from any system and any business process. So democratizing the data was a big deal. I think some of the key decision-making points you have to think about at the beginning of this is, do you want to do this a project at a time, or do you want to take the step of building out a data warehouse and then start the actual rolling of this out? And I'll tell you that I've seen organizations do this two ways. The ones who start with a project at a time, I want to analyze our meeting stuff. Invariably, what happens is somebody starts to ask the next question and the next question and the next question, and you realize, oh, I didn't put that data in a place yet where I can use it, and then the project stalls until you do that. So I can tell you that we took 6 to 8 months building this data warehouse. It felt like an eternity for us to do that. But I will also tell you, when the next question came up, we were able to answer the next question. And that built the confidence and the strength in our organization's mind and the culture, quite honestly, to keep asking the next question. So I was so glad we did it that way. The third thing that I'll tell you that fell out of this, and it really did fall out of this, is a realization that we've got 3 types of data that we were working with. We've got the transactional data, and that's the stuff that normally comes out of an association management system or registration system, et cetera. We had some behavioral data in terms of how people were using certain things, using our website, using our mobile apps, using our marketing automation systems, et cetera. And then we had this real big category of, I'll call it dark data. You can call it unstructured data, which I will tell you has become the basis for a lot of our strategic decision making. And that dark data comes from places, and thank you, Maddie Grant, for helping me build a strong community, from Collaborate. What are people talking about? What are people struggling with? What's their sentiment around the things that they're struggling with? You know, what are the things that you can see start to ramp up as questions or problems in your community that you can do some just-in-time education around, or some just-in-time problem solving around, et cetera. That data, what are people searching for in your website? Are they finding it, and are they happy when they're finding it? Are they getting what they need from that stuff? All of that unstructured data is a gold mine. It's an absolute gold mine. So we had those 3 types of data: behavior data, transactional data, and this unstructured data. And you figuring out which one of those you want to tackle first, thinking about which one of those is going to give your organization the biggest impact, will go a long way toward your strategy. In terms of what it feels like, here's one really scary thing that happened, is that we went from a situation where people who had the best gut instinct, sometimes good, sometimes bad, or the most knowledge, sometimes good, sometimes bad, or the most voice, sometimes good, sometimes bad, to those people having the most power in the organization, to people who have the data and the insight having another level of power in the organization. So we saw some power shifts in the organization, quite honestly. And finally, one of our junior staff persons in an all staff meeting said, why the hell do we keep fighting about who has the most power? The data has the power. And I was like, hey, that's pretty insightful for that person to be thinking about that. So that's where you want to get to. You want to get to the place where the data speaks. The data speaks for your members. The data speaks about your products. Your data starts to speak to the organization about what's next. In terms of what we're going to try to do next, and this is where the next time you see Bill's picture, he'll have a lot more gray hair, quite honestly, is I want us, and we're working on this now, to really change the thinking around engagement and engagement scoring in organizations, so that we're really able to not only know where our members are engaged in the organizations past what they bought, because that's what we typically do, is so they bought this thing and they bought that thing, or they went to this event, to are they really engaged in the organization around the things that they want to be engaged around. So we're working on some of that stuff right now. I want to be a lot more predictive about what's next. And I think that's going to involve us being really thoughtful about what things do we combine with the analytics data that we get. For example, could we pull in some forecasting data from other sources into association analytics, into Acumen, that help us make better decisions? You know, what's going on in society, what's going on in different sectors, et cetera. Can we pull those kinds of things into our platform to help us make better decisions? And so that's the kind of place we're looking at. This next thing is exploring other data sources that we can combine with our data sources to help the organization make better decisions. The end.
Reggie, and the panelists.
I'm sorry, Shirley. Reggie,
Reggie, you talked about.
All right, I'll go. Reggie, I just wanted to comment that before you said something really, I thought that was really important and astute, which was, you know, we had this power shift to the data having the power. And I think that just reminds me of Bruce's comment earlier in the presentation, where he said something to the effect of, in the comments, you know, not everyone is willing to accept that. Like, you can provide this data and there might be some tension between really whether we're willing to follow it or not. And so it gets to that human, messy component of what you're trying to accomplish and why it really is a change management issue.
Absolutely. And as Maddie said, and Peggy and Shelley said earlier, and I think Peggy made some remarks about it as well. It's a culture thing. It really becomes a culture shift, and it becomes, can you shift your organization's culture from people having power centers to the work being the power center and the data being the power center. And it's hard. It's hard work.
I'm going to jump in with a question from Maddie. Reggie, you were talking about how the data really has power, but we also know that leadership of that function is really important, whether it's a dedicated person or not. And Maddie asks, if there is a single analyst team leader, what skill sets does that person need to have? And she admits that they have a lot of implementers, cross-functional team, but they need to find someone to lead the team.
Right. So and I'll speak and give my team leader around analytics some kudos here. Her name is Kristen Berries, who I know a lot of you know already. And the thing that she told me at the beginning of this is, I might not have all the technical skills I need from a data analytics point of view. And what I said to her was, you don't need to have all the technical skills. We've got folks like Association Analytics who have the technical skills. What I need you to be able to do is to understand this ASAE's needs from a not a reporting point of view, but from an analytics point of view. You know, what's the next question that this organization is trying to decide? Can you be, and I'm glad you put it in there, and thanks for Peggy for that word, can you adapt to ASAE's changing needs and enough to know what data it needs next to do its next decision making? Can you pull together effectively voices from across the organization in a very strategic way to understand what those needs are. So this adaptability is very important. The ability to convene people and come to a shared understanding of what our data analytics is going to do for the organization. Come to a shared understanding of what data analytics is not going to do for the organization, and to continually build a strategic case for it.
Bruce mentions that data can be useful for association corporate sponsorship programs. And Bruce, I recognize you from Collaborate, and I know that you're a big advocate for sponsorships and have a lot of expertise in that area. He shares associations should be collecting data about sponsors to inform sponsorship strategy and identify industry trends. And two, sponsors really value receiving data about members, member demographics, member needs, trends, et cetera. And I will say from McKinley as a sponsor, yes to all of those things. Panelists, do you have any other reactions?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say that that's particularly important in today's climate. I'm sure everyone on the call is either in the process of or has recently executed a virtual meeting, that used to be live and have lots of live sponsors, right? So creating that value proposition, for sponsors to engage in a virtual meeting is even more it's even more important to have, comprehensive data to share with them. And then one thing, getting back to the earlier question about what's important for the person to lead analytics. I think from our experience, it's knowledge of the data across those different departments and all the business rules. That's probably number one. Second would be if there are any technical skills required, right? If they have some understanding about how to integrate and sort of wrangle data a little bit, some SQL knowledge would be nice, but it's definitely not required. If you're using a particular tool, like Tableau or Power BI, some expertise in how to use that, again, would be great, but that's definitely something you can learn if you have the curiosity and the knowledge of the data. And then lastly is you kind of have to have, some clout in the organization, right? You have to have some relationships. You have to be the kind of person that, can tell a story with data and have people listen, right? You're really going to be able to make recommendations and affect changes. So I can remember when Kristen was just getting started with this, she was kind of new to the role and kind of like a mid-level person when it came to data. I mean, and she's in the course of a couple of years has become really a model for what you should look for in a role like that.
Yeah, and what I'll add is, and you mentioned it just now, one of the reasons she's such a good fit is Kristen used to head up our knowledge center, which is where all the questions used to come in from our members about everything. And she had to always work with all of the departments to answer those questions. So somebody that has that breadth of knowledge across the organization is key for this role. And Bruce, I'm looking at what you posted in the chat there, and it says, associations should be collecting data about sponsors to inform sponsorship strategy. I'm going to tweak that a little bit and say that associations ought to be collecting data about members and trends and things, as you said a little later on, to inform sponsorship strategy. When I bring any of our sponsors in and to have them look at some of our trend maps that come out of our Collaborate data or come from our website, that's where they really get the value of saying, okay, I can now start to modify my product offering or service offering because you have anticipated that this need's going to happen in the association space. So, but I hear you 100% about your sponsors having access to some of that data is very helpful. So Bill, if we don't get any other questions from the audience, I'm going to ask you a question, if that's okay, sir. If I were to ask you, what's the biggest stumbling block you see? And I know you've seen all the data from the studies and stuff, but but what's the number one stumbling block you see in terms of organizations getting from that beginning stage, at least to an intermediate stage of maturity around this stuff?
Well, I mean, the biggest stumbling block that I see is kind of a fear of getting started. And I'm not sure if this answers your question directly, but there's a couple of things that we see. So one is, our data is not good enough, or we think this is going to be too difficult because we had a difficult AMS implementation, some kind of difficulty with a technology kind of a project that keeps them from getting started, right? So I would say that it can take many forms, but it's something, some variation of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Or whatever, looking for perfect data rather than starting with what you have, wanting to integrate, 10 data sources when maybe 2 would be enough to get started and to do something meaningful with, all kind of, variations around that, just kind of getting hung up on, what can be daunting in terms of scope and length of a project and all of that, in favor of, taking that first step to get started with the change in how they make decisions.
I was thinking back to what kind of flipped the switch for us when we started, and I remember, and I'm playing to what you just said, is I used a $5 piece of software, some app that I downloaded from the App Store, to test a couple of assumptions about our meetings. We had this raging discussion about whether or not the location of our annual meeting is a good predictor of attendance. And everybody thought so. And I said, well, maybe not. So I just took all that data and just dumped it into this $5 product that mapped where attendees came from for the annual meeting. And it quickly said, nope, wrong. So I think, one good place to start is to start to validate some of those assumptions that people have when they're making decisions. And in your soul, that's bullshit. That's a gut level thing. That's a gut level thing that you're doing. Give me some data to back it up. So once you start to test some of those assumptions and the organization sees, no, we don't have to make these kind of assumptions. We can use the data that we had to validate those assumptions. It starts to open people's eyes a little bit.
And we've got a great question from Pat Donnelly. Hi, Pat. He asked you specifically, Reggie, but any of the panelists who want to weigh in, can you comment on the impact of data analytics on defining the value proposition of the organization?
Absolutely.
Again, so relevant
Absolutely.
during this time.
Yeah, the things that we can do are really easily is we know where we used to have to, and we used to have educated guesses, don't get me wrong, and most of them, we got some good gut, but we can zero in down at the product level on what our members think is important. We can go in and look at the unstructured data to see what are our members talking about that's important that we ought to be talking about or building a session around. We can look at this data in ways that we couldn't, and to look at value proposition, not just for ASA as a whole, but what do CEOs see as the value proposition? What do meeting planners see as the value proposition? What do young professionals see as the value proposition? So I think grabbing all that data, you can see it, and you can see it in ways across segments that allow you to strategize better. So absolutely it can.
I can actually add something to that. Reggie was starting to get into it before when he talked about engagement scoring. So one of the things that kind of combine, a lot of the things we're talking about here. So data, in particular, data visualizations with engagement. And one of the things that you can look at is kind of first of all, what's my engagement score, and what's the composition of my score? Meaning that what are the things that I do with the association, and how does that change over time? And really all that does is it speaks to the value that I'm getting from the association. So you can look at that in the aggregate and get a sense for what members value. And then you can even look at it at the individual level or at the segment level and kind of see, like Reggie was saying, is the value proposition for one segment of your members, and not just members, actually, we should say customers, right? Because it applies to some that aren't members as well. How does the value proposition for one group differ from another? And, of course, make decisions about how you change your products and services and your messaging and all of that, to make those improvements that you need to make.
Patrick, I was trying to do it behind the scenes here. One of the things that we've developed in our analytics platform is something that allows me, when I'm having a conversation with one of our members, to test their feelings about the value proposition. So we developed this kind of a report card thing where I can ask them, what are the things that you want to get done this year? And then I can, using the data, here's how the people in your organization consumed ASAE's products, services, education against those things you said you wanted to get done each year. I was trying to do it real quickly here and erase organizations' names and people's names, but I can't do it that fast. But, in terms of value proposition, ASAE has some thinking to do about that on its own as a group or as an organization, but each of your members are testing that value proposition as well. So having some kind of a report that you can give them about how they're consuming ASAE's products and services against their value proposition for ASAE has been a powerful thing for us when we got to do renewals on organization membership, for example.
We have one last question, and we have about 3 minutes left. So maybe if one of you could share your thoughts on this. Maddie asks, have you drastically changed any strategy based on data? Can you share an example?
I can absolutely share an example. I'm going to try to do it without causing any individuals any undue harm. But we completely stopped doing a function at ASAE based on data. We looked at 3 things, Maddie, when we're looking at that. We looked at the number of resources it took to do that particular function at ASAE. We looked at the financial revenue that was coming out of that function at ASAE, and we looked at whether or not members, in terms of their conversations and searches and everything else, were consuming or talking about or interested in that function at ASAE. A long-term running function at ASAE that the data said, nope, this function's time has passed. I wish I could be more specific, but then people's names and things get involved. Hope that answered the question.
Stop doing something, yeah.
Well, we are just about at time, and so I'm going to move us here to this final slide. It's not been updated with Bill's information, but we can share that. If any of you have any additional questions that you'd like the panelists to weigh in on, please email us. We'll take the time to follow up with you. If not, thank you so much for joining us, and a reminder that the report is online, so you're able to and welcomed. Please download it, read it, draw some insights from it, and best of luck on all of your journeys as you continue to evolve your own data and analytics program.
Yeah, and Patrick, I would add, if anybody has any questions that they're not comfortable putting in the chat and want to send me an email, feel free to do that. We can certainly talk about things that way. So let me know how I can be of help.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.